Move it, Boot. This line's for Marines who earned it, not whatever they scraped off the bus this morning. The voice came first. The room came after. Lance Corporal Cody Prewitt stood at the servery rail with his chest out and his thumbs hooked in his belt, 21 years old and playing to the 3 Marines behind him. In front of him, a private stood frozen over a loaded tray, gravy sliding toward the edge because Prewitt had knocked the rim with the back of his hand and thought it was funny. The private's name tape read, Whitfield. He was 19 years old. His hands were not steady, and every man watching could see that they were not steady, and that was the entire point. The dining facility ran long and bright in both directions. 400 Marines at noon. Chow. Steam tables hissing. Trays clattering into stacks. The daylight coming down hard through the high windows and laying white squares across the floor. It was 1200 hours on an ordinary Tuesday, and the loudest building on the installation was doing what it always did, which was pay no attention to a Lance Corporal who had decided to be a small king in a small line. Prewitt leaned in another inch. You gonna cry about it? Go on. Cry into your green beans, Boot. One of his fire team laughed on cue, the short bark of a man laughing because his corporal wants him to. Whitfield stared straight ahead at the sneeze guard and said nothing, because at 19 and 3 weeks in the fleet, nothing is the only weapon you are sure you are allowed to use. Behind Whitfield, behind Prewitt, a woman stood with a tray in her hands and watched. She wore jeans and a plain field jacket and a faded ball cap pulled low, and she looked like nobody, like a contractor's wife who had wandered into the wrong building, like somebody's ride, waiting. She had been in the line 90 seconds, and in those 90 seconds, she had counted the exits, both of them, and the 2 cameras in the ceiling corners, both of them, and read the single chevron on Prewitt's collar, and the name on the boy's chest, and the way the boy's throat kept working when he tried to swallow. She did all of it without moving her head very much. It was a habit older than most of the Marines in the room, and it was invisible to every one of them. She set her tray down on the rail. Not hard, just down. Marine. Her voice was even and low, and it did not ask for anything. That's enough. He's carrying a full tray, and you're about to wear it. Prewitt turned around. What he saw was a woman in a ball cap, correcting him in front of his fire team, and the blood came up his neck fast and hot the way it does at 21 when the whole world is watching and someone has just made you smaller. He did not see the stillness in her. He did not see the way her weight had settled evenly onto both feet, or the way her hands had come open at her sides, or the fact that she had not stepped back the way civilians step back. He saw a lady who had told him what to do, and in the narrow furnace of his pride, that was the only fact in the room. Mind your own business, lady. The backhand came open-palmed and fast, a slap across her cheek that cracked flat in the sudden quiet, and Prewitt laughed as he threw it, already turning his head to collect the payoff from his boys. She did not stagger. She did not lift a hand to her face. She did not touch the red that was blooming high on her cheekbone. She set her feet a half-degree wider, squared her shoulders the smallest amount, and looked at him with an expression that had nothing at all inside it. No fear, no anger, no surprise. And the emptiness of it was the loudest thing that had happened in that building all day. 400 Marines had heard the crack of a hand on a face before. Not one of them had ever heard the silence a person makes when a blow does not move her. The laugh died in Prewitt's throat when no one joined it. He glanced back at his team for the sound he expected, and it was not there. The corporal who had barked a laugh a moment ago was staring past him with his mouth open. The room had tilted a half-degree under all of them, and only Prewitt could not feel it yet. The hall cracked all at once, in the small ways a hall cracks. Down the second table, a corporal named Marisol Salcido was already up and off the bench, one boot swinging over the seat, 24 years old, and moving before she had decided to move. A duty sergeant near the hatch keyed the radio on his shoulder without looking down at it. 2 trays went still halfway to 2 mouths and stayed there. Whitfield's face had gone the color of paper, and he was staring at the woman as if she were a wall that had just spoken. And behind the sneeze guard at the serving line, with a ladle in his hand and a paper cap on his head, Gunnery Sergeant Hollis Bright had gone gray. He was 40 years old, and he had served 18 of those years, and he had seen this woman's face exactly once before, in a place that had cost him a leg's worth of scars, and 4 friends, and every easy night of sleep since. He knew the face, the way you know a face from the worst and best day of your life, the 2 of them the same day. The ladle in his hand no longer wanted to hold still. He set it down on the lip of the pan very carefully, the way a man sets a thing down when his hands have stopped being reliable, and he did not say the word that was sitting behind his teeth. She had not said it. And if she had not said it, there was a reason, and he had learned in a river valley long ago that her reasons were worth more than his comfort. Prewitt still did not understand why no one was laughing with him. He would spend the rest of his life understanding it. Staff Sergeant Cole Radley came through the near hatch at a walk that was fast without being a run, a junior military policeman a step behind him, and he read the scene the way he had been trained to read a scene. A civilian-dressed woman, a keyed-up Lance Corporal, 400 witnesses, and a red mark rising on the woman's face. He put himself between the 2 of them, because that was the job, and the job did not care yet whose fault it was. "Ma'am," he kept his voice flat and his hands loose, "I need you to step back and keep your hands where I can see them." "They've been here the whole time," she said. They had. Loose at her sides, open, in plain view. He noticed it the way you notice a thing you cannot yet explain, that she had not clenched, had not pointed, had not raised a finger to the man who hit her, had done none of the things a person does when they have just been struck in front of a crowd. She stood the way a fence post stands, planted and indifferent to the wind. 33 years old, 11 of them in uniform, Radley had walked into 1,000 rooms like this one, and something about the geometry of her was wrong for the story the crowd had already started handing him. Before she answered another word, she turned to the boy. "Private." 2 words, and the boy's eyes snapped to her. "Put the tray down. Eat when they let you." She held his gaze 1 beat longer, and the next 2 sentences came out clean and square, cut to a length a shaking 19-year-old could actually carry. "You did nothing wrong. You'll say exactly what you saw." Whitfield put the tray down. His hands were steadier coming off it than they had been on it. He did not decide to straighten his spine. It straightened on its own. It was the voice of someone who had put the backbone back into 1,000 19-year-olds and had long ago stopped being surprised when it worked. And it worked now, in the middle of the worst morning of the boy's short career. Radley turned back to her with his notebook out. "Your name, ma'am, and your business on this installation." She gave him a surname and 1 true sentence, with the truest part left out of it. "Castellano. I'm here to see Sergeant Major Thorne." She did not say the rest. She did not say the 4 words that would have turned the whole hall inside out and put every Marine in it at the position of attention in under a second. She let Radley write Castellano in his green notebook, and she let the room keep the wrong idea it had already built. And her eyes went once, briefly, to the ceiling corner, where the small black dome sat watching the servery, because she knew the truth of the last 90 seconds was already sitting on a hard drive in an office 40 feet away. And the truth keeps. It does not spoil. It waits. At the serving line, Bright caught her eye for half a second. It was the first time she had looked at him, and there was recognition in it, and there was an instruction in it, and there was 15 years of an unpayable debt in it, all in half a second. Then the smallest movement of her head, side to side, once, barely, told him everything he needed and nothing he wanted. No, not like this. Stay where you are. He had last taken an order from this woman 15 years and 8,000 miles ago, on a day he did not talk about, on a wall he had not expected to live to lean against. He took this order the same way he had taken that one, which was completely. He picked the ladle back up. His jaw worked once. He stayed behind the line, and he served the next Marine in the queue a scoop of green beans with a hand that shook. And he waited, because she had told him to wait. Staff Sergeant Cole Radley finished writing a woman's name in a green notebook, and he had no idea on earth that he had just written the name of the most senior enlisted Marine on the installation. Sergeant Aaron Dumas stepped in the way a bad team leader steps in, which is to say he stepped in to protect his Marine instead of the truth. He was 26, and Prewitt was his, and the reflex to close ranks around one of your own is older than any regulation, and aimed wrong, more dangerous than most. She grabbed him first, Staff Sergeant. Dumas said, easy, sure, like a man reporting the weather. He reacted. You know how it is. He did not know how it was. He had not seen it. He had heard the crack and turned around like everybody else, and he was now building a wall out of a thing he had not witnessed, because the alternative was that his Marine had struck a woman across the face in a Chow line for no reason at all, and that was not a thing Dumas was prepared to hold in his hands. So he held a lie instead. It was lighter. Prewitt heard the wall going up and started stacking bricks on top of it. She put her hands on me. Everybody saw. 2 of his team nodded on cue, because that is what nodding is for. The story moved. It moved the way a wrong story moves through a room that has already picked a side. Down the tables, in murmurs, low and quick and certain. Who is she? Why's a civilian back in the servery line? She probably started it. She doesn't even belong in here. Castellano stood in the middle of the current and did not move. She read the faces the way she had read the exits, the 2 who had nodded and did not believe their own nodding, the one who had gone quiet because he was starting to do the math. The corporal, Salcedo, standing off her bench now with her fists closed at her sides, looking from the woman to the Lance Corporal and coming up with an answer that did not match the story the room was telling itself. Castellano did not defend herself. She did not raise her voice into the current. She had spent 24 years learning that the truth keeps, and that it does not need to be shouted at a room that has decided not to hear it yet. It only needs to still be standing there when the room finally turns around. Corporal Salcedo took a step toward the middle of it. Staff Sergeant, she said. I was 2 tables over. That's not what— Stay in your seat, Corporal, Dumas said, fast, over her, and Salcedo's jaw set. But she was a corporal, and he was a sergeant, and the hall was loud, and the wrong story had momentum, and she sat back down on the edge of the bench with her hands flat on her knees and her eyes on the woman in the ball cap, waiting for a moment that had not come yet. Dumas came down the line to Whitfield and put a hand on the boy's shoulder, friendly on the outside, and pitched his voice low and close. You didn't see anything clear, right? Don't make this worse for your own guy. Whitfield looked past him, at the woman with the red on her cheek. She gave him nothing that Dumas could see. Just a look, steady and level, that a drowning boy could hold on to like a spar. Say what you saw. When it counts. Not 1 second before. If it turns something over in you to watch a room decide that the good person is the liar, then stay with her. Subscribe to Honor Tales and watch what patience costs the people who mistake it for weakness. Because the woman in the ball cap had all the patience in the building, and every second she spent not using the power she was carrying in her jacket pocket was a second the room spent hanging itself on the wrong story. The lie was winning. The boy was shrinking. And the calmest person in a hall of 400 Marines was the one standing in the center of it, with a handprint on her face. Radley was a professional, and the trouble with the wrong story is that it can be told by professionals too, if it is the only story anyone hands them. He had a woman with no visible identification in a secured dining facility in the middle of a physical altercation, and 3 Marines telling him to his face that she had started it. His stance shifted a quarter turn. His voice stayed level and got firmer at the edges. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see a base pass and some identification, and I'm going to need you to come with me while we sort statements out." Castellano's stillness did not change. She had been detained by better men in worse rooms, on 2 continents, in 3 languages, and she knew the shape of this exact moment, the way an old sailor knows weather off the water. There was a pocket inside the field jacket over her heart, and in that pocket was a laminated card that would have flipped the room upside down in the time it took Radley to read the first line of it. Her hand did not go to the pocket. Her hand stayed open at her side. "I'll come with you," she said. "The cameras will keep." Her eyes went once to the ceiling corner. Radley's eyes followed hers before he could stop them, and he filed the small thing away with the other small things. That twice now she had looked at the camera the way you look at a friend, and that a person with something to hide does not look at the camera like it is a friend. He had a growing pile of small wrong things and no frame yet to hang them on. Across the aisle, a junior military policeman had taken Whitfield a few steps to the side to get his account, and Dumas had drifted along to hover, close enough to loom, close enough to shape it. A word here, a raised eyebrow there, and the written version of the morning began to bend toward the soft middle. A mutual thing, a misunderstanding. 2 people who both put their hands out, and one of them happened to be a Marine. Whitfield's hands had started shaking again on the edge of the table. He kept cutting his eyes toward the woman being walked toward the hatch, and she would not look at him, and he did not understand why. And the not understanding was making it worse. She did not look at the boy. She spoke to Radley instead, quiet, matter of fact, the way a person states a standard rather than makes a request. "Take the private statement alone, Staff Sergeant, away from his chain of command. That's the standard." Radley stopped walking. It was the standard. It was exactly the standard, word for word. The thing his own training said in the block of instruction he could still see in his head, and the thing the pressure of a loud room makes men forget. And a woman in a ball cap and old jeans had just quoted it to him cold, without heat, like a person reminding him of something he already owned and had misplaced. He looked at her a beat too long, the way she stood, the way she had steadied the boy in 2 sentences flat, the way the regulation lived in her mouth like a native language. Something was wrong with the picture, badly wrong, and he could not yet make his eyes bring it into focus. "Get the private statement by himself," Radley said over his shoulder to the junior MP. "Move his sergeant back." Dumas opened his mouth, thought better of it, and stepped back. It was the first brick that did not go into the wall. Nobody in the room but Castellano noticed it, and she noticed it the way she noticed everything without appearing to. They walked her toward the near hatch with a policeman at each shoulder, and 400 pairs of eyes followed her out of the corner of 400 faces, and she let them. She walked the way she had walked into 10,000 rooms she did not own. Square, unhurried, taking up exactly the space she was entitled to, and not 1 inch more. A person watching for it, and only Bright was watching for it, would have seen that the 2 policemen were not really escorting her anywhere. They were walking beside a woman who had decided, for reasons entirely her own, to walk in the direction they wanted. And there is a difference, and the difference is everything. And it would become the only thing anyone in that hall remembered by the end of the hour. The most powerful Marine in the building let herself be walked toward the door as a suspect, because she wanted, more than she wanted to be believed, to know exactly what kind of regiment she had just been handed, And there is no faster way to learn the truth of a place than to be nobody in it for an hour. At the serving line, Gunnery Sergeant Hollis Bright could not stand it 1 second longer. He had watched a Silver Star recipient take a slap across the face from a boot, and then he had watched the same recipient get walked toward a provost office like she was the problem, and he had obeyed her signal to stay silent because he owed her more than his silence. He owed her the entire rest of his life, every year of it, his wife and his 2 kids, and every morning he had opened his eyes since the spring of 2011. And a debt of that size does not get paid by shouting a woman's rank across a chow hall so that a Lance Corporal can be humiliated the way he had humiliated the boy. But there is a difference between staying silent and standing by, and somewhere in the last 2 minutes, Bright had found the exact line between them. He wiped his hands on his apron, handed the serving line off to his assistant with a word, came around the end of the counter, and crossed to Radley off to the side, where the crowd could not hear either of them. "Staff Sergeant." His voice was low and even and had cold iron laid under it. "Before you finish that report, pull the servery cameras, both of them. Watch the whole thing, start to finish, before you put 1 word of it in ink." Radley looked at him. "You saw it?" "I saw enough," Bright said, "to tell you that your career is standing 40 feet from you right now, and you do not know it yet. And you are about 90 seconds from doing something to it you can't take back." Radley's eyes narrowed. "Who is she?" He did not say it out loud, but it was written across his whole face. And Bright, honoring the small shake of her head, honoring 15 years of a debt he had never once been given the chance to repay, did not hand him the answer. He handed him the road to it, because a road you walk yourself is a road you never forget. "Pull the tape," Bright said. "Then pull your arrivals roster for tomorrow, and read the top line of it, and read it twice. Then come find me, and I'll tell you a story about a river valley and the reason I've got a limp." He said it the way a man says a thing he has waited 15 years to be able to say, and refuses to cheapen by rushing it out. Then he turned and walked back to his line, picked his ladle up, and started serving Marines again, with hands that had finally, at last, stopped shaking, because he had found the one thing in this whole morning that he was allowed to do, and he had gone and done it, and the doing had steadied him more than any order to stand down ever could. Radley stood still for a moment with the notebook half open in his hand. Then he called his junior policeman over, said 6 quiet words, and sent him to the dining facility manager's office to pull the footage. No one had planted it. No one had staged it, or fabricated it, or slipped a doctored file under a door in the dark. Every dining facility on this earth has 2 cameras bolted over the servery, and they had been recording since 0500 that morning, and they did not care who anyone was, or what anyone's rank was, or which story the room had decided to believe. They had simply watched, the way cameras watch, and kept it. There is a name this woman has not said out loud, and there is a tape about to say it for her, to 400 Marines all at once. If you want to be in the room when they learn what they just watched, subscribe to Honor Tales and stay right where you are, because it is very close now. A gunnery sergeant walked back to his serving line having paid nothing yet, and knowing with total certainty that the whole hall was about to. There was a river valley once in the spring of 2011, and a staff sergeant named Castellano, who was 29 years old and did not yet know whether she would live to be 30. The audience should know now what the Chow Hall did not. 800 meters of open, broken ground, and a compound at the far side of it, and a platoon caught in the low seam between the two when the valley opened up on 3 sides at once, all at the same instant, the way the worst days always begin, with everything at once and no warning at all. The platoon commander went down in the first 30 seconds. The platoon sergeant went down inside the first minute. And Staff Sergeant Castellano, who was supposed to be a squad leader and nothing grander than that on that particular day, did the arithmetic that no one can ever be taught. The arithmetic that says the size of the fear does not change what has to be carried or who is left standing to carry it. And she took the compound. She set a base of fire. She put the guns where the guns needed to be and made the Marines behind them believe they could still win a day that had already tried to end them. She got voices onto the radio and steel into the air and order into a place that had come completely apart in 90 seconds. And then, when the fire was set and the Marines who could shoot were shooting, she went back out into the 800 meters of open ground, 3 separate times, for Marines who could not come back on their own. Twice she came back dragging someone by the drag handle of his kit, low, fast, through ground that spat dirt at her the whole way. The third time she came back dragging a 25-year-old Lance Corporal who had a hole in him and a certainty behind his eyes that he was already finished, already gone, already a name for a wall somewhere. She got him to the compound wall and put his back against the stone and told him, in a voice that did not permit argument or debate or the luxury of dying, that he was not finished. And he believed her, because there was nothing else in that entire valley worth believing, and because she said it like it was a fact she had already checked. His name was Hollis Bright. He was 25 years old. He lived. He would limp for the rest of his life, and he would open his eyes every single morning after. And both of those things were true, because a staff sergeant had crossed open ground a third time when no regulation on Earth required her to. The Silver Star came months later, in a room with folding metal chairs and a flag on a stand. She stood through the citation the way a person stands through a thing that seems to be happening to somebody else, somebody with her name. 2 hands lowered a ribbon to her throat, and while the words of the citation were read aloud into the quiet room, she thought only of the 2 Marines she had not been able to reach that day. The 2 the arithmetic had not let her carry, because that is the arithmetic too. The part of it that never comes out even. The remainder you carry the rest of your life in the small space behind the ribbon where no one ever looks. She did not wear the ribbon in a Chow line. She did not wear it most places. A person who has actually done the thing rarely needs the world to keep confirming that she did it. The knowing sits quiet and permanent and does not require an audience, and it changes the way a body stands in a room, whether the ribbon is on the chest or folded in a drawer 2 time zones away. That was the thing the whole hall had been looking straight at all morning and could not read. The stillness of a person who has already found out, in the worst possible classroom, exactly what she is made of, and has nothing left to prove to a Lance Corporal or to a Provost or to anyone else who has not yet crossed their own 800 meters of open ground. 24 years. That is what she had put into the core by the morning she walked into that chow hall in jeans and a ball cap. And the reason she had walked into it a full day before anyone expected her, dressed like nobody at all, was that the regiment she had been sent across the country to lead had a problem she could read in a stack of paper long before she ever set a boot on the base. Incidents, patterns, a discipline gone loose at the seams, a culture that had begun to rot quietly in the small places where no general ever thinks to look. She had not wanted a staged arrival. She had not wanted a swept hall and a rehearsed first impression and a straight line of squared-away Marines who all knew the new sergeant major was watching them. She had asked quietly of the assignment officer and of the universe both to see the place with its guard all the way down. This morning, in a chow line, the place had given her exactly and precisely what she had asked for. It had given it to her across the face. She knew the tape existed. She knew Thorne was already on the installation and expecting her tomorrow. She knew, standing there being walked to a provost office as a suspect with a handprint fading on her cheek. Exactly what was going to happen in the next 10 minutes. And she was letting it come to her rather than reaching out and seizing it by the throat. Because a lesson that a room arrives at on its own is the only kind of lesson that ever truly holds. The woman with the red mark on her face had already decided, somewhere back around the second scene of the morning, that she was not going to destroy the boy who had put it there. She had simply not yet decided how she was going to save him. Prewitt could feel it going wrong, the way an animal feels weather coming. He did not know about the tape yet, not in words, but he could feel the room's weight shifting off him. He could feel the murmurs stop favoring his story. He could feel Radley's questions getting slower and more careful. Could feel his own sergeant stop backing him quite so fast. Could feel the corporal 2 tables over staring at him, like she had already decided. And a 21-year-old with a wall of lies stacked behind him and no way to climb back over it does the single stupidest possible thing, which is to try to nail the last board down by force. He came off his spot and crossed the aisle to Whitfield in 3 fast steps and grabbed the boy's sleeve in his fist and put his face down close to the boy's face. "Tell them." His voice had come up loud and thin, and the thinness of it was the sound of a man who can hear his own story failing. "Tell them she started it. Say it. Say it right now." Radley was already moving, and was already too far away to reach it in time. Corporal Saltito was up off her bench for the 2nd time that morning, and this time no sergeant told her to sit down, because the sergeant who had told her to sit was standing frozen with the rest of them, finally beginning to understand what he had spent the last hour defending. The whole near end of the hall had turned to watch a Lance Corporal put his hand on a 19-year-old to force a lie out of him. And there is a thing that happens in a room of Marines when a bully overreaches in front of everyone at once. The sympathy that had drifted his way an hour ago drained out of the floor beneath him in a single second, and left him standing on nothing. Castellano was not too far away. She came off the spot where the military police had parked her, unhurried, exact, and put herself between the Lance Corporal and the boy. Not a lunge, not a shove, nothing a camera could ever call aggression. Just a body arriving in precisely the right place, at precisely the right speed. The way a body arrives when it has done this 10,000 times on worse ground than a Chow Hall floor. Her hand stayed low. Her voice stayed flat and quiet. "Let go of my Marine." The word landed wrong on Prewitt's ear. "Mawayu." He did not hear the rank that was folded up inside that one small word. He heard a woman claiming something that was not hers to claim, laying hands on his morning again, and it lit the same hot fuse that had lit 90 minutes before at the servery rail. He let go of the boy's sleeve and squared on her instead, chest out, chin up, one hand coming up between them, in front of the cameras, in front of the military police, in front of 400 Marines, who were all, now, every one of them, watching this and only this. He was building the case against himself with his own 2 hands, brick by brick, and she stood there in front of him and let him lay every last one. And then she smiled at him. It was small, and it was almost kind, and it was the first warmth she had shown in the entire morning, and it was the most frightening thing that had happened in that hall all day. It was the smile of a person who has offered you every possible exit, and watched you refuse each one in turn, and who has made her peace now with what comes next, because you chose it yourself, in the open, in front of witnesses, with your own raised hand. "There it is," she said, quiet, just for him and for the 2 black domes in the ceiling. "Now everyone's seen you." Prewitt's hand hung in the air between them. Something in the smile reached the old animal part of him that the noise and the pride could not. The part that knows a predator when it finally, too late, sees one, and he hesitated, hand half raised, mouth half open, the fuse suddenly gone damp in his chest. And in that one suspended second, that half-breath of a moment where his hand hung stupidly in the bright air, a voice came across the entire length of the dining facility from the main hatch, and it was not loud, and it did not need to be loud, and it never would again. It said one word, and then it said a rank, and then it said her name. Normal Sergeant Major Castellano. Sergeant Major Gideon Thorne stood in the main hatch with his cover in his hand, 50 years old, 31 of them in the Corps, service uniform pressed to a blade's edge, the outgoing regimental sergeant major of the installation, and the single most senior enlisted Marine any of them had ever stood in a room with, until today, until this exact moment, which none of them would ever forget. He had come looking for the relief who was not due until tomorrow. He had heard she might already be on the base, had followed a hunch and a duty log to the loudest building on the installation, and he had found her. He saw her across 400 heads. He stopped dead mid-stride, and he said her rank aloud into a room that was already holding its breath, and his voice carried the way a senior man's voice carries when the air in a place has gone that still. There was no call sign. There was never going to be a call sign. There was a name, and there was a rank, and in that hall, at that moment, they were enough to stop the earth. The room did the arithmetic in 1 second flat. The woman in the ball cap, the civilian, the one nobody could place, the one back in the servery line where she did not belong, the one Lance Corporal Cody Pruitt had slapped across the face and then squared up on a second time, was the incoming regimental sergeant major of the entire regiment. Was the woman half of them had heard about in a barrack story about a river valley and a staff sergeant who crossed open ground 3 times. Was, as of one word spoken from a hatch, the senior enlisted Marine on the whole installation, and every single one of their bosses' boss, and every one of their bosses' boss's boss. 400 trays stopped where they were, halfway to a mouth, halfway to a table, halfway to the rack by the scullery. They hung there in 400 pairs of hands because not one Marine in that hall could make his own hands finish a motion that no longer made any sense, in a world that had just, in a single spoken word, rearranged itself completely. A fork stood straight up out of a plate of eggs and stayed there. A paper cup came down an inch toward a table and stopped an inch above it. Somebody's chair scraped once and then went silent, as if the sound itself had been embarrassed. The hiss of the steam tables was suddenly the loudest thing in the entire building, a long, unbroken exhale in a room that had forgotten how to make any other noise. At the serving line, Gunnery Sergeant Hollis Bright set his ladle down for the second time that morning, and this time, his hands did not shake at all. He had waited 15 years to watch a room learn what he had learned on a wall in a river valley, and here it was, 400 faces arriving all at once at a truth he had carried alone since the spring of 2011. That was the woman off the wall. She had not changed in 15 years. He had simply gotten to watch, this time, from behind a sneeze guard, with both his legs under him because of her. And then the hall came to its feet. Not in a mass salute. A salute is a small and formal thing next to what this was. It was the older reflex, the deeper one, the one that lives down under the skin of every Marine ever made, and does not stop to ask anyone's permission. The sergeant major is present in this space, and you stand. Bench by bench, table by table, 400 Marines rose to their feet, trays forgotten in their hands, or set down without a sound, and the standing rolled down the long length of the dining facility, like wind moving across a field of wheat, one row bending up after the next. And the woman with the red mark on her cheek stood in the very middle of it, still, exactly as still as she had been in the second the hand had landed on her face, because the stillness had never once been the stillness of a victim. It had been the entire morning, the stillness of the most senior person in the room. And now, finally, the whole room could see it for what it was. Prewitt's face ran the entire distance in about 2 seconds. Confusion first. Why is everyone standing up? What is happening? What did I miss? Then disbelief. No, she's a civilian. She has to be a civilian. There is a mistake, and someone will fix it. Then recognition, arriving all at once and from every direction. The arrivals roster and the servery tape and the word Sergeant Major all slamming together at the same instant behind his eyes. Then horror, pure and total and cold as river water, as the true size of the morning opened up underneath his boots like a floor giving way. He had struck the regimental sergeant major of his own regiment across the face in the Chow line in front of 400 Marines, and then he had squared up on her a second time, in front of 2 cameras and the military police and every witness the Corps could ever want, and there was no wall left anywhere in the world tall enough to hide behind. His raised hand came down slowly to his side. His face went the exact color of the trays. Staff Sergeant Radley had watched the footage 90 seconds earlier, on a laptop his junior policeman had carried out to him from the manager's office, and he closed the laptop quietly and did his job the right way now, the way it should have been done from the very first minute, if the very first minute had been fair to everyone in it. 2 military policemen took Lance Corporal Prewitt into custody for the assault, cleanly, without theater, without a single raised voice or a hand laid rougher than it had to be, because striking anyone in that hall was always, from the first crack of a palm on a cheek, going to end in exactly this place. It had nothing to do with her rank. It had everything to do with the plain fact that he had done it, and it was on tape, and a person answers for what they do. Thorne crossed the hall to her through 400 standing Marines, and they parted for him without being asked, and he stopped an arm's length from her and looked at the fading mark on her cheek, and then at her eyes. "You're a day early," he said. "I wanted to see the place with its guard down," she answered. "And?" "Now," she said, "I know exactly where to start." The truth cascaded the way the truth always does, once a room finally turns all the way around to look at it head on. Within the hour, it was all settled. The servery footage showed the strike, unprovoked, plain, from 2 separate angles that agreed with each other completely. Private First Class Whitfield gave his statement alone, away from his chain of command, the way the Standard said, and the way she had insisted on when she was still the suspect in the room, and he gave it straight and steady, and did not shake once while he gave it. 2 of Prewitt's own fire team quietly went back and corrected the record they had helped to bend an hour before. Lance Corporal Cody Prewitt would answer for the hand he had raised, fully, immediately, and in exact proportion to what he had actually done, which was a serious thing and would be treated as a serious thing. But there is a machine the Corps keeps oiled for the ending of a young Marine, a fast machine and a thorough one, and there were men on that installation that afternoon who simply assumed she would feed him into it whole and walk away clean. It would have been easy. It would have been justified. It would have been the ending every single person in that hall expected, the kind of ending that closes a story with a heavy lock and throws the key in the harbor. She had spent 24 years learning exactly when not to feed that machine. She sat down across a plain table from Prewitt that afternoon, not to gloat and not to loom over him, but to decide, which is the harder and lonelier thing. And she did not raise her voice, because she never once did. "You'll answer for the hand you raised," she told him. "Every inch of it. There is no version of today where you don't, and there should not be one. And if you go looking for one, you'll find me standing in the door of it." She let that sit in the quiet for a moment. Then she leaned in the smallest amount, and her voice got quieter instead of louder, which is how the dangerous ones do it. "And then you'll answer for it under me, because a Marine who'll swing at a stranger in a Chow line wasn't born this morning. He was grown, right here, in my regiment, in 100 small moments that 100 people declined to check. I don't hand my mistakes to a machine and call that justice. I don't leave them lying where they fell for somebody else to sweep up. I pick them up myself, and I fix what made them, and that is the whole of the job. She did not end his career. She could have ended it with a single sentence, and everyone in the building knew that she could, and she chose the harder thing instead, which was to keep him accountable, disciplined, reduced in rank, watched close, and kept under the direct eye of the very woman he had struck. Because quiet is not the same thing as weak, and a mercy that costs you nothing at all was never really a mercy in the first place. If you believe that the strongest thing a person can do with power is refuse to waste it, then subscribe to Honor Tales. There is always another soldier, and there is always another story that few will ever hear. Sergeant Aaron Dumas came to her on his own before the day was out. He did not send word ahead, did not wait to be summoned, did not build one more wall out of one more excuse. He stood in front of her at the position of attention, and he owned the part of the morning that had been his from the start. "It was mine before it was ever his, Sergeant Major," he said, and his voice was not quite steady, and he did not let that stop him. "I'm his team leader. I should have checked him a year ago. I laughed at things I should have shut down cold, and that's how a Marine gets the idea that this morning is fine. That's on me. Not just him." She let him keep his stripes. Then she gave him the harder sentence, which was the only one worth handing him. "Then fix it," she said. "That is the entire job, Sergeant. Nobody's coming to do it for you. Go, do it." And that, more than the custody, and more than the paperwork, and more than the tape, was where the morning actually turned into something. Because the incidents she had read in a stack of paper across the country had never been about one Lance Corporal with a hot temper. They had been about 100 Sergeant Dumases in 100 small moments, declining to check a thing that was easier to laugh at, and a culture does not rot from the top. It rots at the fire team level, in the Chow line, in the exact place she had chosen to walk in and stand. She had come to see the regiment with its guard down, and now she had seen it, and the fixing of it would not be a speech at a formation. It would be one squared-away corporal, and one steadier boot, and one team leader who finally did his job, multiplied out across a regiment, slowly, the only way anything real ever gets fixed. 4 months later, on an ordinary gray morning with nothing special about it, there was a small thing. The kind of thing that never makes a citation, and never makes the news, and never gets a single word said over it. A young Marine, squared away now, standing a good deal straighter than he used to stand, was being handed a small and real responsibility, the first thing anyone had trusted him with since the spring, and he took it from the hands that offered it like it weighed something, because to him, now, it did. Beside him stood a Lance Corporal, who had once been the shaking boot at the very bottom of a Chow line. Whitfield, filled out now, steady on his feet, no longer the smallest man in any room he walked into. And at the back of that room, in camis, with no mark left on her cheek at all, and 24 years sitting easy in her shoulders, the regimental sergeant major watched for exactly as long as it took, and said nothing at all, and turned and left before anyone could think to turn it into a story about her. There was no coded greeting passed in the dark. There was no name written on some far theater across an ocean. There was no ghost out of a river valley reaching back to pull her toward one more war. There was only a woman who had spent her power the way the best of them always spend it, quietly, and on someone who had not earned it yet, and might, one day, precisely because she had. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.